So, how are we doing? Seriously? How are we doing?
Hey.
Wow, I knew the Germans were pretty reserved, but I didn't realize it applied to the Austrians too. Hello, Pepper. I see you there. Stop up, trying to upstage us. So, you're in for a real treat this afternoon. My name is Luke Robert Mason, and I'm blessed to be able to welcome Yania Lo to the Pioneers' 2018 stage.
Thank you.
So the aim of this year's festival is to blur the boundaries between possible futures, both multiple and parallel, alarming and disarming, utopian and dystopian. Ultimately, at events like this, we have an incredible opportunity to bury the 20th century and to begin work on the 21st. So, let's begin. The promise of artificial intelligence is that it will save us from the natural stupidity of human beings. 1.2 million people die every single year from traffic accidents. Distracted driving alone has left thousands killed and hundreds of thousands injured. It only follows that there needs to be a massive rethinking of how our transportation systems operate. Self-driving cars and autonomous vehicles are the latest technologies promising to reduce human error on the road. But these devices generate unique concerns and force us to ask new questions about agency and about responsibility. These questions need to be answered sooner rather than later, because already we're starting to see autonomous vehicles in the wild. Google's early experiments are quickly evolving into partnerships with companies such as Uber. Traditional car manufacturers are racing to develop their own softwares, and young upstarts like Tesla have already launched their autopilot systems in the wild. It was inevitable that we would start to see mistakes, and we have seen mistakes. In 2017, Uber tested their own self-driving fleet on the streets of San Francisco without the permission of the DMV. These tests led to numerous traffic violations, which, somewhat ironically, Uber blamed on human error. Yes, the car may have malfunctioned and it ran a red light, but it was the human safety driver that failed to stop it. With these tests already taking a safety third approach, it is time we better understand the moral frameworks that we may have to assign to these artificial agents. So to help us do that, please put your hands together and welcome Yania Lo to the Pioneers stage.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody.
So Yania, you're the expert in this field, and you're the expert here in Vienna from a philosophical standpoint on this problem. And the first question I want to ask you is, do you think automated driving is inevitable? Do you think we're actually going to see this future for our roads?
Well, since I'm a philosopher and not a prophet, I can only say so much about it. I think it's not inevitable, but I think we're on a very good way to get there. We actually already have partially autonomous vehicles. We're far away from full autonomous vehicles, since for that stage the law has to change, because the industry is not allowed to put full autonomous vehicles on the streets just without asking any questions. But we're on our way to get there, so it might be possible to get there eventually.
Now, I want to touch on one of the moral debates that we always have when we talk about self-driving cars. It seems to be an overdone debate, but it is the trolley problem. So just so we can talk about the elephant in the room and then just move on from dealing with that moral and philosophical issue, what is the trolley problem? Why is it applied to self-driving cars? And do you think it's still relevant?
Yes, I think it's still relevant. It's actually a thought experiment invented by Philippa Foot in 1967, I think. And it's about a runaway trolley that goes down a track, and you are standing at a, how do you call it, lever, I think. And if you decide not to switch the lever, then the trolley will hit 5 people who are on the tracks. And if you decide to skip the lever, then the trolley will skip to another track, and then it will hit maybe 1 person. In this debate on autonomous vehicles, it got very famous this trolley case example. And I think it's important because with the help of this thought experiment, people can ask how ethical decision changes, how ethical decisions come to different conclusions in this trolley case example. On the other hand, in this debate, people are using this trolley case example as if it is a problem to be solved, as if it would be a problem that has one correct answer. And it is actually not. It's actually a thought experiment to show that there are different ethical theories that could each give a different answer to the same sort of problem. And it's not a problem like that you can solve empirically or with social statistics or something like that.
The crazy thing is most people assume we're going to be the individual pulling the lever. It's more likely that we're going to be one of the individuals tied to the tracks and someone else is going to have that agency. And let's talk a little bit about agency and how that applies to things like self-driving cars, because you're interested in this field from a philosophical sense because you're interested in how core human competencies such as autonomy and agency and responsibility might have to be applied to these artificial systems. I mean, in what way could it be applied? Is there any equivalence between human agency and non-human agency?
Of course, I mean, there are different theories, and I will not talk about theory here, not to scare you away. Well, there's a very classical differentiation between the strong AI thesis and the weak AI thesis. And the strong AI thesis says that it is actually possible to equip a computer or a machine in a genuine, in a real way with certain capacities. But there are some problems with that thesis because I can actually not look into the head of another being. And even if you would cut me open and search inside my brain, you would not find free will or autonomy or responsibility in a strong sense. And that is actually the problem with the strong AI thesis. But in the weak AI thesis just says it is possible that certain machines simulate certain capacities. They actually attempt to do so as if they are equipped with these capacities. And that is actually enough. And we have a lot of machines that, in this sense of the weak AI thesis, can simulate a lot of competencies, just as, such as autonomy, responsibility, emotions as well, empathy, and consciousness, and other competencies. So I think it's possible, and we already do that.
So once these devices and once these cars are simulating these sorts of behaviors, they're going to have to start making decisions. And the question then becomes, once they've made that decision, who is responsible? I mean, your key concern in a lot of the work that you've written is about this word responsibility.
Right.
Do you believe that responsibility can be assigned to artificial agents such as self-driving cars?
Well, it can actually, but it's not a question of all or nothing, since responsibility is a very complex competence. It can still be ascribed in a gradual manner. You can speak of more or less responsibility. It's not that if you and you alone are responsible for a certain issue, and if you, well, you cannot define responsibility as, let's say, a ball that you throw, and if the person who catches this is stupid enough to catch it, then this person has responsibility and no one else does. So responsibility can be ascribed in a gradual manner, and we can say that, well, a lot of very complex machines are responsible in a very, in a very narrow sense. But even the most complex and the most smart machines, the smartest machines, they will never be, well, at least in a far distant future, they might not be responsible in the same way as humans are. So in the case of autonomous driving systems, even though we might ascribe some level of responsibility to cars, all the human beings involved, and that means the operators of the driving system, the owners, the programmers, the designers, the users, the industry, they are still way more responsible for the cars than the cars themselves.
mean, that's what's really interesting about your specific reading of this problem, that the agency won't sit with the individual car itself, but it'll be I think you call it a network of responsibility.
Right.
Could you explain what this network would look like and what a network of responsibility means?
Yeah, it's, well, in a nutshell, a responsibility network means that in situations that are intransparent and very complex to understand, we can actually combine several smaller narrow responsibilities to a great net of responsibilities. And let's say the responsibility network for traffic. This responsibility network for traffic has numerous responsible agents and subjects, such as the people that I just said, the industry, the programmers, the designers, the driving teachers, the pedestrians, the car operators, and maybe the autonomous cars themselves. There are several authorities of responsibility, such as the law, such as several normative criteria. There are several objects of responsibility, and all in all, these numerous responsibilities come together in a great network of responsibility. So that.
Well, the first two nodes in that network are the relationship between the
Yes.
human driver,
Yeah.
and we're not going to call them drivers when they're not doing anything in the car other than making sure it doesn't malfunction, and the car itself. And you've argued for the driver needing to communicate their moral convictions beforehand,
Right.
and have that be the thing that guides the way in which the car operates within the world. Could you explain what that would look like as a design challenge, let's say?
Well, we could imagine it as a sort of interface, a questionnaire that when it comes to, well, at some point in the future, when we imagine that we will have full autonomous vehicles and we are allowed to buy them on the market, then the person that will buy such a car could still fill out a questionnaire that says, well, if you come into an accident, should the car, I don't know, always try to save your life, or would it be allowed to save the children's lives that are running across the street? Maybe some people would say, no, of course, it should always save my life, right? What a question. I think a great number of people would decide that way, but maybe there are still other people who would decide to give their own lives up for the life of the children, stuff like that.
I mean, so. You're forcing it explicitly from people in that respect. They come into the car dealership, they have to fill in this questionnaire to decide what sort of moral person they are in the world. Is there ways we could do it implicitly? Could we, say, scrape your social media feeds? I just worry the idea of, say, scraping Donald Trump's Twitter account. What would a self-driving car with the personality of Donald Trump look like? Well, it's clearly going to career into the bus full of Mexicans rather than career into the redneck on a bus.
Right.
I mean, there's
of course.
putting those sorts of human flaws into artificial entities is going to open us up to a whole new can of worms. Don't you think that's even more dangerous?
I think that's a misunderstanding. The whole questionnaire, this interface, this way of personalizing your car should always be within the horizon of the given law, right? And within the horizon of traffic rules. And at least in Germany, we have an ethical a group of people who decide over what is going to happen, like an ethical committee, who is going to decide what will happen when we have autonomous driving cars. And they published a statement last summer, and they said, well, it is not with 10 to 20 principles in it. And they said, well, it's not, the car is never allowed to decide for several criteria in which group they will head, like people that are more attractive, or people who are younger, or people who have a better job. Those are not criteria that we are allowed to decide. But
then people who drive BMWs are always assholes. So self-driving BMWs are going to be a real pain in the ass, don't you think? There are certain sorts of individuals that drive certain sorts of cars. Do you think we're opening a bottle of worms if we, or a can of worms if we allow for the ability to port all the flaws that make us human into artificial systems? Don't you think the real goal here is to create, say, a fully automated driving network, a future whereby we will never have human drivers? Do you think that's the only way this could be done, potentially?
No, I don't think so. And we would still have these problems that we as humans decide over the ethics of our machines. This will always be the challenge. Not the problem, but the challenge. And actually, what my greatest or most important attempt is to make clear that it's very important that we have ethical courses or teaching for those people who will program these cars, and not only the cars, but of course we have robots in every sphere of human existence, and we need the technicians and the programmers to learn about ethics, to make sure that. Well, maybe not to make sure and maybe not to guarantee, but to be on a better way to make sure that the right ethics will go into the machines.
So then my question to you is, I know you work around the world with individuals in this field from an industrial perspective and from a business perspective. I mean, how do you have this sort of influence? It feels like a lot of these organizations right now are taking a very proactionary approach. They're testing and they're learning, and yes, blood has been spilt, but it hasn't been as bad as what we've seen with human-driven cars. There's a massive risk to human-driven cars, but if we were having this debate back when the car was being invented, it would have never occurred. So how do we have that discussion in the right sort of way, that it doesn't quash innovation, but it allows for human safety?
Well, I mean, it's my and our responsibility as scientists to structure this discourse in a transparent way and to talk about it not in a academic and I don't know very theoretical and abstract way, but to talk about it in terms that everyone and not only philosophers from the university understand. And for me it appears that, well, a lot of people from the industry are naturally drawn to what I would call utilitarianism. They always say that the numbers are important, and it is actually better to drive over the old lady on the road and not to drive over the group of doctors, for example, that are crossing the road. And this is something that I, as a philosopher, try to get an influence on when I talk on conferences about these things, to explain that this is actually to decide in the name of different criteria to where the autonomous car is going is actually contrary to our value of the human dignity, for example. That human dignity is something that makes one individual that gives it an infinite value, and that has nothing to do with how young you are, how beautiful you are, what job you have. But since human dignity is, well, at least in German and Austrian law, what do you say, untouchable, inviolable, it is our most important value, and that is not addable in a mathematical sense. Two people are still as infinite as 10 people are and as 100 people are, and that is something that the industry, that I try to explain to the industry to influence them.
So ultimately, are you hopeful that we're going to be able to give these artificial agents a moral framework?
Well,
that's a slightly worrying silence.
Well, who should get them the moral framework, or?
or designers, all these people in this network that you're talking about, do you think we're going to succeed? Do you think we're going to get there eventually?
Well, definitely we will succeed. We cannot do anything else but give them a moral framework. It is a question of what moral framework it will be. Well, people cannot construct and program their machines in a neutral way. It is just not possible. You always give your values into the machine when you construct the machine. It is just the question of do you do it explicitly? And if you do it explicitly, then what norms are you following and what values are you giving the machine? And
so really, that's a question to each and every one of us to both assess our own moral framework and to assess the moral framework that we may be either implicitly or explicitly porting to their artificial agents. So on that note, just a quick reminder, tomorrow we'll be hosting another panel on artificial sexual relations, because if robots don't kill you or run you over, they will fuck you in other ways. And on that note, I want to end with this warning, which is the warning that we end every single event that I do back in the UK, which is when you're thinking about the future, just be aware that futures are always virtual. Some things, all right, I get it. I'm over time. Futures are always virtual. And some things that may seem imminent or inevitable never actually happen. Fortunately, our ability to survive the future is not predicated on our capacity for prediction, although, and on those much more rare occasions, something remarkable does come of staring the future deep in the eyes and challenging everything that it seems to promise. I hope you feel you've done that in this session. Please join me in thanking the incredible Yania Low.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, well done, you guys. Actually, you know what? I think we've got a few questions for you guys. Do you mind?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, all right. Come on back out here onto the Pioneer. So on Slido, we have some questions here. Speaking of responsibility, could it be justified to allow decisions by machines without full insight? Without full insight.
Full insight from whom?
Okay.
So I think if I can reread that question, I think, and I don't know if the person, Joachim Roth, is in the room, but I think what he's trying to say is, do we allow machines to make decisions without all of the available information? And if we are going to make them make that decision, do we allow them to do it in collaboration, say, with a human individual? Do you actually think it will still be this 50% robot, 50% human decision making if we don't have all the information?
Well,
yes.
Right now, yes. I think right now we are at that point that we have to interact with machines and that we have to share our responsibility maybe with it. But I mean, the great hope of bringing autonomous vehicles on our streets, isn't it that autonomous vehicles are much better in having full insight of what is going to happen, because they are much faster than human beings. They have like a greater overview over the situations, and that is one of the great promises, that streets will be safer and that in the end they will have full insight, at least.
Don't you trust us, machines?
What?
She just asked, don't you trust us, machines?
No, not yet. And not in every not in every situation. It depends on the situation. If you are my Roomba, then I trust you. But if you are my car, then not. Well,
okay.
sorry.
She puts me on edge anyway, and I know she doesn't do anything slightly scary. She doesn't drive anything, she doesn't kill anything, and you're not allowed to fuck her. So I know that there's or he, we don't actually know what the gender is. Puts me on edge anyway, so I don't know what it is, but I think machines are innately scary, especially when they have this kind of anthropomorphic elements to them.
There's just a little something.
There's a little something about her. It's the way she shouts out in the middle of the closing statements that doesn't help. All right.
Well, I think we've got a couple more questions and a little bit more time. She took that as a compliment, by the way. So we've upvoted, because the crowd is upvoting questions. So the next upvoted question is, when do you think AI will be grown up enough to be accepted by legislators? And I guess the answer is always 7 years from now. But in your personal opinion?
Well, again, I'm not a prophet, but a philosopher. And if you would ask Ray Kurzweil, then he would say in 2045. That is his answer. And I'm very careful to not being too specific about that. I'm not sure if we will ever reach that point, because it is still our decision. It is still not a determined path that we are on. It's still our decision if we want to have these clever and smart and strong AIs. So I think we should talk about that first and not understand it as a law of nature that we will get there eventually. For me as a philosopher, that's more important than that.
So to be fair, I think we've already accepted AI, and we have AI that runs rampant on the financial stock market system anyway.
True.
We've seen the damage and the harm that can do, the 2008 stock market crash. So I think we're already behind, or legislators are already behind where AI is at. This stuff is already here. It has agency over us, and it is already causing massive loss of life and lifestyle. So I think we're too late.
Yeah, but still, this AI is still very different from what is actually asked in that question. A real strong AI, a universal AI, is an artificial intelligence that will be able to operate in every situation that human beings will be able to operate in, like right now. This strong AI has to be so flexible as human beings are. And right now, we have, although very, very smart and clever artificial intelligence and machines, we still have like island competencies. We have a Roomba, and we have AlphaGo computers, and we have the financial stock market algorithms, of course. But these are still machines and algorithms programmed for a very specific task. And we do not do ourselves a favor if we just jump to the abstract level and say the machines will go on and run the world.
Yeah.
Because
I think if anything, there's strong AI debate. The reason why all those Silicon Valley execs, Musk and whoever else is running around with the Future Life Institute, I think the reason they're advocating the fact that we may get strong AI that might kill us is just good marketing.
yeah, of course.
They can't build it, but let's scare people and make them think we can build it so they can get the investments in their companies. I reckon we should be a little bit more suspicious of the advocates of Silicon Valley, but that's just my opinion.
All right, then. Well, on that note of suspicion, we'll finish up this session. Thank you very much. A round of applause for Luke and Janina.
Thank you.